The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the podcast belong solely to the hosts and not the host's past, present, or future employers. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It's Brian, and only Brian this week. The next couple podcasts you've heard is with me. Miss Berlin, Mr. Betcher, of course, have day jobs and are unable to join us, and we hope we'll be able to get back with everybody very soon. This is number 2 of our sponsored podcast with Illumio. I'd like to welcome Miss Katey Wood to the show.
Hi, Brian. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate that. Thank you for taking the time to come and speak with us today.
My pleasure.
So for those of you who are listening, yes, this was a sponsored podcast, just like the earlier one with Neil Patel. They did pay money for us to talk about Illumio today. So if you are interested in finding out about microsegmentation and ransomware, we're going to hear it here with Katey, and we have one with Neil as well, if you'd like to go back and listen to that one as well. Katey, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got to be where you are today, and what your job at Illumio is?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a director of product marketing here at Illumio. I've been here a couple of years. I do customer case studies. I kind of specialize in new products and roadmap and launching what's next for us. So most recently, that's been our container solution and our new endpoint solution, Edge. But prior to that, I actually come out of digital forensics. So I'm not really from a networking and security background. I dealt with dead data. I did a lot of compliance and privacy work as well. I did my field training at KPMG at an accounting firm in digital forensics. And prior to that, I worked as an analyst for a while covering the markets for venture capital and private equity around search, storage, AI, whatever's clever. So I've got a mixed background going back about 12 years.
Okay, awesome. I've never heard the term dead data before. I don't dwell in the DFIR area, so that was kind of interesting.
I think we're supposed to say probably data at rest, but now that I don't do it anymore, I think of it as dead data. Is that bad?
No, okay. Data at rest is dead. Okay, no, I love that. I had not heard it called that. Data at rest is like, some people have different definitions for even what that means in some cases. So, I like the dead data part. So, we're actually all about talking about data with y'all this week at Illumio. We have some questions here. So what are some of the challenges that businesses are currently facing when dealing with the storage of PII?
Dealing with the storage of PII. Well, obviously everybody working from home and having everything be so cloud-based is a big challenge. The headline is obviously ransomware. Like that's the big thing. We just here in California had passed CCPA, the California Consumer Privacy Act, and now you can be fined per Californian per incident when you expose people's data. So you come from a healthcare background, I believe, Brian, and you must be aware, like healthcare is obviously being targeted for this quite a bit, but like any kind of vertical that has a lot of PII is, that's just kind of ripped from the headlines recently.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Especially, now that everything is pretty much work from home until we get us a working vaccine that allows people to go back into work. Do you think that the problem will change once we start heading back to the office, or you think that the current situation has awakened people to the fact that they're actually storing a lot of data in out of the way places?
No, I don't really think it's going to get better.
Well,
digital forensics is full of like former law enforcement, so I guess I'm just a little skeptical. But yeah, right. No, I mean ransomware is here to stay. It just keeps getting more expensive, and no, I think it's probably going to continue to climb.
Okay. We've done several shows where we've highlighted with guests about companies not knowing what their data is worth. Back when I worked at healthcare consultancy, it was like $10 per medical record, or $1 per credit card number. Why do companies not understand the value of their own data? Do you think it's cultural, or is it they just all see the forest instead of this particular trees?
I think until it happens to you, it's something that always happens to somebody else, you know. People just kind of need to feel the sting either from being breached or having some kind of a compliance mandate. I mean, it's not as if this isn't happening, it's just not happening to everybody, you know, like that old, was it Isaac Asimov said, the future's already here, it's just not evenly distributed. So some people feel the sting a lot more acutely, and other people say, oh, that's a nice to have, but I don't really feel like it's costing me money yet, so I don't need a really expensive lock.
Right. So going back to the CCPA, you said it's per user per incident. So is there a max fine for this, or is it like GDPR where it's 4% of something, and or is it based on the courts, like one case is going to be worth $100,000 per user per incident, or is this one's only worth $10? Is there any kind of specific level for that?
Yeah, it's a dollar amount. I can't remember. I think it might have been 700 per Californian per incident. And I mean, if you know any Californians, we're very in touch with our feelings and with our attorneys. So we
Right.
plan to make good on it. But yeah, it's legal damages, right? The US is the most litigious country in the entire world. So I think maybe it's even more of a sting than GDPR, which, frankly, has not been consistently enforced. Like a lot of the privacy regulations, it's one thing to have them on the books, it's another to actually fine people and then enforce the fines and make sure they pay them. So I think CCPA, if anything, the US is nothing if not litigious, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So I've been around a few years. I have heard of assumed breach. I first heard it when I went to University of Washington meetings with the CISO up here. Why should companies automatically assume the worst and that they've been breached? And we worry about things like breach fatigue. How do we assume breach in an environment and not continually preach that the sky is falling? How do we make that fine line and walk that line?
I mean, to me, it's just kind of a hazard of the profession, right? Like you are always being attacked when you're in security. You just kind of have to stay paranoid. So I don't really worry about that. But to me, assume breach just means I think traditionally we've put so much of our resources at the perimeter, and like, why would you do that anymore? Eventually somebody gets in. That's why this keeps happening. I mean, imagine when we used to go to hotels all the time, like you don't just put a lock on the front door of the hotel. No, everybody has their own room key. Everybody's got a key to where they can go. You want to go to the gym, or you've got a key for your own floor. You've got a key for the club, right? So that's really just what segmentation is. It's not, relying on one key that you put on the front door. It's having things broken down internally so that you can control security and access in a more granular way.
Okay, and so segmentation. How easy is that to implement in an organization? Let's say you're a hospital system, United Health, for instance, or Cape, one of those major health systems. We want to implement segmentation. What does it look like to architect a solution that is effective to assist hospital systems or financial systems or banking systems?
Well, it depends, right? I mean, there's a few different ways to skin the cat. And I think traditionally, like folks have looked at the perimeter firewalls and say, hey, maybe we can segment internally with those, which turns out to be sort of a headache and maybe not tenable for every situation, right? So there are a few different solutions out there for segmentation. Folks go through their network, through their switches and routers. That's obviously a network-based solution that's going to have some limitations when you go off the network. Folks go in through their virtual machines and try to segment through a solution like that. The easier way to do it, I mean, there are a lot of limitations on any kind of hardware-based solution. You're just kind of setting yourself up for that. There's infrastructure, there's changeover, all that kind of stuff. And that's why I've gone to a company that has a host-based solution where you really don't need to rely on the network, and everything's just kind of done through Windows-based firewalls, which are in any given operating system on a host. So it gives you a lot more flexibility and ease of deployment.
So you mentioned just deploying firewalls in the typical three-tiered application kind of stack, or in a network. Is that not a fine-grained solution, or should that still be used along with Illumio's type of technology?
Using internal firewalls for segmentation just has a lot of limitations. It's not, first of all, there's just a lot of rules. You're using IPing. You may be doing that yourself. It doesn't have a lot of flexibility. You're going through the network. As I said, there's going to be a ton of hardware. You're bringing in pallets.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just not really an elegant solution. It's not a purpose-built tool. You're kind of trying to fit a round peg into a square hole. And the upshot is that a lot of these projects never reach fulfillment, or at least they don't accomplish the aims of what they set out to, because it's just not really an elegant solution for it.
Mm. Yeah, having worked in the financial space, one of the major projects I had was cleaning up a series of firewalls, and there was over 10,000 firewall rules, and trying to make sure that we were still staying secure, as well as cleaning up old firewall rules that would allow anybody to access anything. And we had PCI requirements and whatever. Was very, very challenging. So maybe we
The
could talk
change
a little.
management can be really like one of the most challenging parts of it. If you
Oh
need
yeah,
to, stay current,
right,
like if you have set it and forget it policy, then good for you. But who's got
right.
that, right?
Exactly, exactly. So how does Illumio work to actually segment the data? I'm imagining that you've got a pool of storage over here that's being protected by something, and you use Illumio, and then all of a sudden you're in the data. But it doesn't work like that, right? Is it
Well,
how does
Illumio
the
works through
sausage get
the
made?
firewalls, the Windows filtering platform that's on any host. So we just have a lightweight agent. It's not cracking packets or anything. It's really just kind of an antenna that's set up. And that's going to collect telemetry that allows you to create policy for whitelisting. We haven't really gotten into zero trust at all, but that's sort of the thrust of what Illumio is good at. We're a leader
Hmm.
in zero trust in the Forrester wave, and we really allow companies to put in this zero trust allow list policy without too much of a headache, by mapping out their traffic and giving them a visual representation of that, and then just making it really easy to build, test, enforce, and put your firewall policy into enforcement without breaking anything, which is a really big value add.
Okay. Um, we're all working from home. One of the things is, as a company, I'd be, how do I deploy this in my environment? How does a an IT organization that's distributed potentially globally push out Illumio? Is it? I'm assuming it's agent based. So
Yeah,
is
it's
there a way to
agent
push it?
based. I mean, it's pretty easy. There's not much magic to it. I mean, for me with segmentation, the more interesting challenge is like, as a security professional, like what are you going to segment first, right? I think, to your point about what company assets are valuable, like whether it's your user data for PII, like obviously you want to protect that. If you're a hospital, you've got to have everything ring fenced so nobody can get to that. Like they shouldn't even
Hmm.
be able to see where it is, right? But there's other stuff that's super valuable in your organization too. What are your critical services? How are your domain controllers being protected? Like, it's interesting to see how companies decide to kind of roll it out. And Illumio lets you do it in phases, which I think is really valuable because you can. It's a lot easier to sort of target low hanging fruit, and you can do a risk assessment, maybe through NIST or whatever, and say this is what we think is most valuable to us as a business, either because it keeps us up and running or because it's a potential liability if it goes live because we're a law firm or a hospital, right? And then, maybe these are our critical services like domain controllers and the things that are the keys to the kingdom. So um, I think for segmentation, the interesting question about deployment is like, what do you value as an organization and how are you going to make zero trust something that's kind of tenable across all of your assets? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things, and it's been a year since I've been at a security conference, but a lot of organizations were saying, well, we have an agent for endpoint security. We have an agent for log collection and collation. Illumio is another agent based system. you've got number of different agents on the system, all taking their own resources. How resource intensive is the use of this system for a user?
Yeah, everybody's heard that, right? Not another agent. We're trying to get rid of our agents. We call it the virtual enforcement node. It's a very lightweight agent. As I said, it's not really cracking packets. It's just sort of delivering telemetry of what the traffic is on your network, so that you're able to get a visualization and sort of a map of what's actually happening. And when I took my SANS training, they teach you if you can't see it, you can't secure it. Like if you don't understand something, you're not able to secure it, right? You need to know how many doors there are in the building before you order that many locks. So the VEN just really kind of gives you that visibility. It doesn't even provide enforcement. The enforcement's all done through the Windows filtering platform, which is already in your operating system. So there's really no load at all.
So it was at this point Zoom started failing, and it ended up being that Katey had to log back in via phone. So we finished up the rest of this interview with her on the phone into the Zoom bridge. So I'm a small and medium business. I don't have a lot of budget, and I'm listening to this podcast and I'm like, oh, this might be for me. What's the cost in terms of manpower and time and effort needed to get this installed and running?
Sure. We actually have a ton of SMB business around this, because if you think about who's subject to HIPAA, who's subject to FERPA, it's a lot of doctor's offices, could be smaller hospital chains or physicians, organizations. Not every university is that big. A lot of smaller colleges are subject to PII regulations like FERPA around student records. So a lot of those places have an IT shop of one, right? And that's really all that it takes for Illumio. Many folks are able to even outsource it to other teams so that they really don't have to worry about it on a day-to-day basis. And I'd say that's a big value add for our smaller customers.
Okay, excellent. So we've mentioned FERPA and CCPA and some PCI stuff. I'm coming up for my yearly PCI audit, and I have Illumio. And what can I tell my auditor when they're coming in to do the audits as to what Illumio is and does, and how does that help me be PCI compliant or SOC compliant or what have you?
Sure. Well, you'll be able to tell your auditor that you've ring-fenced your PCI DSS environment adequately. You'll be able to tell them everything that can and can't go in and out of that little ring fence. And the obligation is really around isolating that. So it just gives you a really defined documentation of what can and can't go in and out of it, basically, that it's entirely locked down. That's a pretty well-established area, I'd say, across retail.
Okay. So we've talked about logs, we've talked about compliance, PCI. No retailer has ever been PCI compliant if they've been breached or had ransomware, because that's the way they wrote the standard. How does segmentation assist people or organizations that are in the midst of an incident response where there's ransomware? Does it how does it help in this case?
Well, if you have segmentation already, I mean, it's just, assuming you're talking about endpoint segmentation between laptops or desktops, it gives you that kind of default containment where nothing's going to spread. So say, Brian clicks on a link that he shouldn't have. Everybody does it once in a while. Mm-hmm. You can just have that sort of certainty that whatever you've clicked on is not going to be able to spread to any other machines, because if you've segmented things, it won't be able to on whatever ports you've allowed or disallowed, right? That's the allow list. It just kind of gives you that security that people can only connect to things that you've proactively given them access to, right, through an allow list. So if they don't have that, it's not going to be able to spread.
Okay. How granular does that allow list get? Can you go by whole networks, or can you go down to like the file names, or can how granular can that whitelist get?
Well, Illumio is known for microsegmentation, so I mean, we can even go down to nanosegmentation. It depends on whether you're talking about for the data center segmentation that we do or for the endpoint segmentation. But it gets pretty granular, and that's one reason why it's a lot easier than using perimeter firewalls.
Okay. Let me see. So, cloud-based assets that we have, whether it be a data center or AWS, if you're still using a traditional data center, AWS, what does how does that integrate with your AWS or your Azures of the world in terms of integrating and cordoning off that data? Is it have native integration or is there any kind of add-ons that are required for that?
Well, I'm not an expert on deployments. One of Illumio's differentiators is that we do go across heterogeneous environments. So you're not dealing with kind of a network-based solution that's going to have issues going to the cloud. We're just going to work on your Windows filtering platform within the host. So it has a lot more agility and ability to go across any environment, whether it's one of the clouds, private, public, working with containers, Kubernetes, and OpenShift. It's another drawback of kind of a network-based or any sort of point solution for segmentation is that you're just kind of adding another trailer onto the truck, right? Because if you have all these separate kind of disparate segmentation solutions, you're administering them separately. They don't really work together. You've got more gaps. And if you try to change anything, it breaks, right? So Illumio is really well positioned for the cloud just because it kind of gives you that uniformity. You can have a single policy and it'll be consistent across any environment you use it for.
Okay, and these policies, can they be pushed out via a CCM or GPO, or is there a centralized management system that Illumio has for using to push out policy?
Sure, we have the policy compute engine as kind of the grand central brain that does all the orchestration and then pushes down all the instructions to the VEN, which then orchestrates the enforcement through the Windows filtering platform. So again, like the agent is very lightweight. It's just kind of transmitting telemetry and then pushing down the orchestration of the policies, and all the real enforcement is done at the host.
Okay. All right. I think that was pretty much it. Did any other last thoughts about the Windows filtering platform or Illumio before we go, Katey?
I would just touch a little bit more if you would let me belabor zero trust. I think from speaking to prospects and customers, it's something that a lot of folks think is sort of unattainable or they're interested in, but it doesn't, maybe next year. And I think really now more than ever, we're seeing that our networks at home are largely ungoverned. We have a lot of, IT assets that are meant to govern our network in the office that are going to be paid for this year and not used, right? And meanwhile, we're kind of exposed. So I think that folks really need to take a hard look at zero trust and think about what's manageable in their organization. And especially as so many folks are going to be on these networks with their kids who are also doing stuff remotely. And we really don't have any kind of visibility or control over what's happening. Like, it's really more important than ever to kind of prevent that lateral movement that leads to these giant breaches and have more control. And it's really achievable with zero trust. So just encourage people to give it a second thought.
Yeah, I mean, being remote as it is, you still have your traditional VPN and what have you. Moving to zero trust would present a challenge in terms of how, Monday I'm going to be working with this new system versus Friday. Last week I was working with the old system. How do you pitch that to your organization in terms of a change in this case? Should it be a phased out approach? Is there a way to do a hybrid zero trust model? Zero seems fairly,
well, it's one of those things where they say, you eat the elephant one bite at a time, right? Like we were talking about having sort of a phased deployment, and I think you need to choose which applications are most important, and then it's easiest if you're able to start when you roll them out, right, and kind of have things established then. But the beauty of Illumio is you can see what traffic is happening and what the communication is on the network now, so who's going to be using it already. And you can use a build, test, enforce methodology, which is best practice, right, to make sure that you're not going to break anything. So, there isn't any guesswork. That's really the beauty of it. Like, you don't have to sort of wonder, you're not going to break anything. And that's where we hear the time to value is really fast from customers because they just know it's not going to break anything.
Okay. That's cool. I was thinking of that because it's like, well, if you're doing a hybrid approach, will this work alongside your existing VPN? Let's say you have AnyConnect or something like that. Can you use Illumio at the same time you're using the VPN, or will there be issues there?
Yeah, no, I mean, I do it, so I'm
Oh,
sorry,
okay.
I don't deploy Illumio that way, but it's being done.
Okay. Very cool. All right. Well, Katey, thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate your insights about the Illumio and the platform and Windows filtering platform. Sounds like that's a show we need to do by ourselves on Windows filtering platform. It looks like a very interesting thing to discuss there. Appreciate your time and coming on.
You got it, Brian. Thanks so much for having me.
And we're done. Cool. All right, I'll just splice this together and put a little something in the middle saying, "Oh, we had problems with Zoom and we logged in and joined with the phone." So, yeah, I'm sorry about all the technical issues. Normally, we don't have problems with Zoom like this. So, yeah,
Yeah, I'm so
appreciate you coming
sorry. I don't
on.
know what happened. Is it going to be okay, or do you need me
I'll
to do it again or something?
No, I'll make it work. I've had dropouts before with interviews as well. So I'll just put it into Audacity, splice out all the bits where me and Holly and Allie were talking, and I'll bring us in. After you got back on the phone with a short little blurb saying, "Hey, we had trouble with Zoom." As long as that works for Holly and Allie.
Yeah, I think that's totally fine. We're in
Okay.
2020, and I think everyone's having technical difficulties from time to
Right.
time. So make things
Okay.
more relatable.
No, I agree. I agree.
Oh gosh.
Excellent.
If you need anything, just let me know. I'm super sorry. I don't know what's going on.
No, it's okay. I got dropped too, and I've got gig speed internet up here outside of Seattle. So, it is what
Wow.
it is. So, yeah. And so appreciate
Thanks so
everybody
much for
coming
your
on.
flexibility.
It's all good. After doing this for 6 years, you get to, like water off a duck's back. So cool. All right. Yeah, like I said, this will be out on Monday after our book author discussion, and let me know if you have anything else you'd like to add to the show notes, or and hopefully we'll get this pushed out through Illumio's social media accounts as well.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Thanks.
All right.
Sounds
Thank you
great.
all.
Thanks so much, Brian.
Yep.
Thanks,
No problem.
Brian.
Have a good
See ya.
weekend.
Thanks, Katie. Bye.
Thanks. Have a
You
good
too.
weekend.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.